Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, we're diving straight into some absolutely mind-bending source material today. We are unpacking texts that make a massive, deeply provocative claim. The physical world, exactly as you know it, is a sophisticated, persistent lie. The sources argue that it's a construct, a system literally designed to keep infinite consciousness trapped inside a finite experience. But we aren't just going to look at the trap. Today, we're going to explore the specific tools these sources provide to break those chains entirely.
So be totally honest with yourself for a second. Who is actually listening to the voice in your head right now? Is it the eternal, silent observer? Or is it just biological software running on some outdated autopilot? You know, we spend so much of our time completely wrapped up in the daily drama of our lives that we totally forget to step back and ask, who is actually projecting this movie?
The sources lay out this foundational hermetic principle to start us off. The universe is mental. Now, this isn't just pretty poetry. The texts explain that matter itself is really just condensed thought. It's kind of like how ice is just frozen water, right? The physical reality surrounding us right now isn't actually solid, and it's certainly not immovable. It is a highly fluid mental construct just waiting to be molded by whoever knows how to direct it.
And because of this, the sources challenge you to completely dismantle the trust you have in your own eyes. They call this the veil of Maya. Think about the actual physics here. Atoms are 99.99% empty space. To put that into perspective, what feels like solid matter under your fingertips right now is really just magnetic force fields repelling each other. Your biological senses are literally filtering out reality to present you with this incredibly convincing, heavy hallucination.
Now, this isn't just some woo-woo mystical theory. It's actually grounded in hard neuroscience and neuroplasticity. When you actively choose courage over comfort, you physically build new neural superhighways. Your brain, with its 100 trillion neural connections, is not fixed concrete. It's malleable clay. You are either consciously rewiring it for dominance or you're unconsciously letting it default to weakness.
So the really crucial point here is figuring out who is actually pulling the strings. Meet the hidden scribe. This is your subconscious mind, and get this, it controls 95% of your actions based on completely outdated childhood survival programming. It acts like a giant blind tape recorder. It doesn't judge if a program is good or bad for you, it just executes it, no questions asked. It's the secret engine room currently projecting your physical destiny.
The texts draw this really stark line in the sand between two types of people. On one side, you have the mentally weak sleepwalker. This person blindly reacts to ancient fight or flight emotions, basically living like a puppet. But on the other side, you have the mentally dominant master. The master recognizes the sacred gap between a stimulus and their response. Sure, they feel intense emotion, but they observe it as mere data, rather than letting it violently dictate their actions. So how do you actually hack this scribe? Well, the sources demand a ruthless mental diet. You literally have to starve your old programming. That means zero consumption of toxic news or gossip, and absolutely no complaining. None. Your mind has to be treated as a sacred garden. The texts emphasize that the absolute most crucial step is to hypnotize the scribe during the hypnagogic state. Those are the crucial 5 minutes right before you fall asleep. You use that window to bypass your brain's logical critical factor and install entirely new beliefs.
To actually program the scribe, the sources introduce this concept of relentless certainty. It's all about holding a mental mold completely motionless in your mind, even when physical reality is actively pushing back against you. True faith, according to the texts, shouldn't feel like this hopeful, anxious wishing. It should feel like the calm relief of tetelestai, which means it is done. They even point to the placebo effect as biological proof that absolute, unwavering conviction synthesizes literal, real-world miracles. Now, where do you get the fuel for that kind of certainty? The sources absolutely destroy the whole passive, good vibes only myth. Alchemical warriors don't just sit around smiling all day. They use dense, nuclear energy. They use the sacred anger of roaring, "Enough!" The unreleased tension of sexual alchemy, and the profound, crushing suffering of the dark night of the soul. They use these intensely dense emotions as literal rocket fuel to manifest their reality. Okay, so here are the actual actionable steps the sources give to transmute those emotional triggers into pure creative power. They call it the implosion technique. First, locate the sensation physically in your body. Second, practice hermetic containment. Do not let the fire out by shouting or reacting. Keep it in. Third, elevate it by literally imagining breathing that energy up your spine. And finally, the laser shot. Project that intense pent-up energy out of your third eye directly onto your goals.
This idea of containment,
It doesn't just apply to your feelings. It extends right to the words coming out of your mouth. The esoteric tradition calls this the language of the birds. Think of the science of cymatics, where sound frequencies literally organize matter into geometric shapes. The sources heavily warn that complaining is basically a black magic spell you are actively casting against yourself. The true initiate accumulates manifestation power through hermetic silence, only opening their mouth to emit high-frequency decrees.
And right at the very center of this spoken alchemy are two little words, I am. The text described this phrase as the ultimate activation code that literally freezes the quantum field. It is a direct, undeniable command to your scribe. Whatever you say right after I am becomes absolute law in your subconscious. So the sources argue that we are required to declare health, wealth, and power, even when every single one of our physical senses is screaming the exact opposite.
All right, now we are entering what the texts call the Labyrinth of Mirrors. Drawing really heavily on the teachings of Neville Goddard, the sources present this terrifying yet incredibly liberating truth. Everyone is you pushed out. Think about that toxic boss, or that cheating partner. The explainer frames them as just actors, hired by your hidden scribe to play out your own deeply buried inner scripts of fear or unworthiness. Reality is literally just echoing your internal state back at you.
So how do we break out of this loop? First off, you've got to practice divine indifference. Stop reacting to the current reflection in the mirror. Understand that today's problems are just dead stars. They are delayed echoes of your past thoughts, slowly pushing their way through dense matter. You have to cut those energetic cords through radical forgiveness and use Goddard's revision technique to go back in your imagination and literally overwrite past traumas.
Which brings us to a really intense concept from the Gnostic texts, the idea of the human farm. The sources outline the existence of archons. These are described as parasitic systems and thought forms that feed on our fear, our outrage, and our emotional energy, which they refer to as louche. Just think of modern social media doom scrolling for a second. The system is entirely built to harvest your reactions. The text strongly urges us to revoke all contracts of consent. Stop reacting. Become an invisible gray rock to the system, to completely starve it of your energy. To actually escape this system, the sources say we have to completely redefine our relationship with time itself. We have Chronos, which is the linear clock time of constantly waiting and feeling anxious. And then we have Kairos, the eternal now. This actually lines up beautifully with the block universe theory and modern physics, where the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously as a single block. The goal here is to step entirely out of linear anxiety and instantly tune your frequency to the version of you that is already successful.
The texts even go after the ultimate fear, death. They completely dismantle it. They describe death not as an end, but simply as taking off a heavy, rusted diving suit. They warn of the Bardo transit zone and something they call the white light trap of forced reincarnation. Because of this, they urge the daily building of an immortal Merkaba, or light body, which you do through conscious detachment as you fall asleep each and every night.
So when you boil this massive paradigm shift all the way down, it really comes down to one fundamental choice. The victim reacts to the mirror, they complain, they generate toxic energy, and they constantly beg for an outside rescue. But the sovereign creator, they assume radical and often painful responsibility. They do not react. They mentally dominate the reality, fully knowing that they are the projector of the movie, not the projection itself. Which brings us to the final and probably most important question. What are you going to do now? The sources leave us with a massive challenge. Do not just be an intellectual glutton who endlessly consumes this information without ever taking action. Step into the physical world as a new hermeticist, an infiltrated agent of the spirit. Be the person whose mere presence, silence, and relentless certainty actually cracks the matrix around them. The veil is officially lifted. Now the choice is entirely yours.